It was one of the most important things that ever happened in my life, in business or out of business.
Hey guys, Jarrod here. Welcome to another episode of Creative Corner. And today I am very honored to speak to one of my personal favorite actors, Curtis Armstrong. Thank you, Curtis, for joining
Oh,
for this episode.
it's my pleasure, Jarrod. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I guess we'll go ahead and start with more so, and we talked about this off camera about your experience as an actor, and because I've had a friend that's in the early stages of his career, and
Hmm.
I just would like to get another perspective from someone that is a little bit more established, and I believe I've heard in one of your interviews that you originally started off as a stage actor
Yeah.
and did not intend on being a film actor.
No, not at all. I mean, we were. I went to an acting academy, a 2-year course that was at Oakland University in Michigan. A very good school, and very highly regarded school at the time in the late '60s, early '70s, throughout the '70s, really. And it was sort of it was done in a they taught sort of the English classical tradition. It was founded by English teachers, meaning British teachers, not teachers of English. Um, and they had come over from various schools in England to establish this place, which was connected to Meadowbrook Theater, which was one of also a very highly regarded regional theater in Michigan at the time. And so there were people. Robert England was one, actually, who now so well known as Freddy in the Friday the Third. I mean, in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, who was 2 years ahead of me, I think, at the academy. And you would go through the academy, and then sometimes would be offered jobs as a professional actor at Meadowbrook Theater, and that was where you got your start. And that was one of the things that happened to me. We had founded our own theater company after our graduation. A good portion of maybe three-quarters of our graduating class formed a theater company, an itinerant theater company based in Ann Arbor. And we started there, and then in the middle of that, I was asked uh, to come and do Midsummer Night's Dream at Meadowbrook as Puck, and that was the beginning of my professional career that summer, which was the summer of 1975.
What attracted you to stage as opposed to film or television originally?
I think because there was a sense in those days that was how you did it. That it was important to learn the craft. Um, there were people who did not, who became big movie stars or television stars, so that it wasn't an absolute necessity. But a lot of the people who I admired in movies like from the 20s and 30s and 40s were all people who started on stage and then became actors. And so I think it was just something that was really possible. I had teachers, Will Young in middle school and Dwayne Thompson in high school, who were actors. They had been actual working actors on stage. And they were the ones who really put me on the path to wanting to be an actor. So their idea was you have to train. And the place to do it if you weren't going to Juilliard or the different well-known theater schools around the country or England, the place to do it was the Academy of Dramatic Arts at Oakland University. So they encouraged me to do that, and and then once I went into it, to go back to your original question, why I wanted to do it on stage, is that once I was exposed to that world, I didn't want any other world. And you go through that process, and whether or not the teachers had that in mind when they were teaching you, what you come out of it with often is a kind of fascistic look at what you do, and you sort of say, well, this is the pure, this is the way to do it, and this is where I'm going. I'm going to be a stage actor. Movies are um, not possibilities. Television is unthinkable. All of this stuff, because that's what you do. You train to be a stage actor, and now you're going to be a stage actor.
You said Midsummer's Night's Dream was your first professional role as
Mm-hmm.
Puck, which I'm picturing that, and it had to have been amazing seeing you as Puck, but because that's one of my favorite Shakespearean plays.
Mm-hmm.
But how did the role in Risky Business come about?
Well, that was years later. That was
Yeah.
83. So in between 75 and 83, all I did was stage work.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to New York finally in 76, and started working on off Broadway showcases, whatever I could get in various places, and then gradually started moving up the ladder in New York on stage, to the point of doing actual, off Broadway paid work, and then doing regional theaters around the country, and doing tours, national tours. I did a national tour of a Broadway play, which got, in 1978, got best. Was it 78? I think it was 78. It got best play, and also got, oh God, I can't remember what the other. It was a very, very famous play in that season called Da, which is an Irish play by a writer named Hugh Leonard. And I would say it was a combination of going on a national tour of that play, and then also I was doing an off-Broadway production at the Colonnades Theater Lab, um, where was coincidentally another Irish production at that, and these happened sort of back to back, and they both got a lot of it. I mean, the Colonnades Theater Lab got a lot of that production, got a lot of critical acclaim in New York. So once that started happening, once I started moving up into that area of um, stage work, that made it easier for agents to submit me for film work. So I started doing auditions for film, and the first one that I got was Risky Business, because they came through. I mean, they were mainly casting in New York, uh, and but they were also casting in. I mean, they were mainly casting in Chicago, because that's where we were going to shoot, and but they came to New York for additional auditions.
Okay.
So that was how that happened.
So I'm interested in your experience in auditioning for roles or taking on roles throughout your career, because I my how much has it changed from starting with Risky Business until now? Is
Well,
is the process much different? Uh, speaking from just anyone that's interested in the behind the scenes
Well,
things.
yeah, it's very different for me because I've been doing it for 40 years. So it over 40 years, hopefully you learn something. And to some degree, there are things that I've learned about how to approach an audition. Um, and I've also gotten to the point where I have a sense, right or wrong, when something I'm going to is being offered for an audition, something that I feel is not right, or something that I feel I'm not capable of doing to the best of my ability, and so I know what not to go in on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and also one of the things which sort of necessarily changes is that over all of these decades, I've become known to the point that I get offered jobs. I don't have to audition. So sometimes I have to audition, sometimes I don't have to audition. You know, and it's to me it's all the same. I mean, I the auditions are something which I have long accepted as part of what I do for a living, and I no one likes it. No one really that I've ever met likes the process of auditioning for something, especially for television. It's horrible, but it's part of what you do. It's part of your job. So when I have to do it, I do it, and when I don't, I'm very thankful that I don't have to do it.
Speaking of going into specific auditions, is there any advice you can offer to younger actors who are starting off in their career? As far as I think some actor friends that I talk to, they just accept whatever they can get,
Oh, they should.
to get started. But what advice would you give to someone if they're offered, audition for a role that completely isn't complete opposite or completely opposes who they are as a person, or goes against who they are? And
I don't know. I don't think that's something that I can really advise people. I've turned down things for that reason. I mean, auditions for that reason, or jobs for that reason. But that's not something that I would recommend to everybody. I mean, you have to make a decision. A lot of people can just separate themselves from that, and they don't have a problem with doing that. Uh, that's not. I mean, that's up to them. I can't give advice about that.
okay, maybe you'd have some insight. But um as far as the roles that you've taken on, because especially recently with Metatron and Supernatural, um, do you have any particular process that you go through that maybe, because some people may be used to more seeing you as Booger, or in Better Off Dead, or maybe even Moonlighting, where they see one side of you, but then they see Metatron, who at first seems like this really nice guy, and is not at all.
Well, yeah, I can't. I unfortunately, in the case specifically with Metatron, I can't really say what my process is, because I was as unaware of any as anyone else was
Okay.
about where they were going with that character. It's not like they sat me down and said, "Okay, the scribe of God, and we're going to start with him being a really nice guy, and he's going to be supportive, and we're going to lure everybody into thinking that he's just this charming bibliophile." And then by your third episode, you're going to see that he's actually evil beyond belief, and then by the next season, he's going to kill Dean or whatever the thing is that he does, and become hated. They never told me that. All I had to go by was what I what I had in that first script. So as a result of that, it's not like a movie where you can go beginning to end and you understand where your character is going. All you can do is be in the moment and figure out, how to play a certain role. And that's something that, you just do at this stage after all these years. It's something that I do sort of instinctively. That from experience, you look at something and you go, okay, and you know who the character. I mean, I'd seen the show before, so I knew who the other characters were, and just play the reality of it. The reality of it is tremendously important. Uh, you know, uh, that's a big deal, and hard sometimes. But pretty much everything that I've done that I feel good about, and that even includes Booger, is all done in a way that it all goes back to a traditional approach to a role, which goes back even to the Academy, where you play that part in that character's reality. You don't wink at the audience. You don't. You keep within the physics that your job requires. And in the case of Supernatural, the physics, to me, were anything is possible because of the history of the show. But no indication even whether I was going to be doing one more or any more. I mean, they don't tell you that. So how can you prepare anything? How can you know who the character is other than just decide for yourself who the character is and play that reality? And that's what I've done on Supernatural since the first episode, because I never know.
And that's a very good point.
And what happens to Metatron even so far, without saying any more, again, not that I'm not a font of information about what's happening on Supernatural. I haven't been on it for a while, so I can't say. But whatever has happened up till now, I don't know how I'm going to do anything until I get the script and see.
How much did you enjoy playing Metatron once he went? We find out he was evil and he was. Because from the conversations we've had or the interactions we've had, he's the complete opposite of your personality. And
Booger is more Booger is more opposite my personality than Metatron is. But I mean, obviously I don't. I think I can say that. Obviously, it's tremendous fun to play a role like that, because not only is it always fun to play a bad guy, but it's fun to play a really smart, funny bad guy. That's the best kind of evil character to play. And I love doing that. I mean, but by the same token, I really liked the first episode, because people who know me, thought, well, was this written for you because of all the books and the stuff like that, which of course it wasn't. But it was just, it was wonderful. Even when I thought that he was, I mean, I could have, if the character arc had gone in a different direction after that first Supernatural, and had become a supporter of the boys and a helper and all that, it would have been as much fun, probably, or maybe as much fun. But I have to say that the evil element and the havoc he's wrought has been really, really fun to do. I'm glad he's evil.
One thing I wanted to make sure to ask you specifically about Metatron, he makes references here and there to Sherlock Holmes and has a few
Yeah.
lines. How much did you get to influence that? Was that out of you
I
taking on the role, or
No. Well, what happened was there's actually been only one exchange that was really a direct one about Sherlock Holmes with Metatron, and that was in Robbie Thompson's script, which was the big Metatron script where they established it was like I don't remember how many in or even what season it was, but it was called Metatron. No, it was called Metafiction, and Robbie Thompson, who's one of their writers and executive producers, he wrote that episode, and he had seen online about my interest in Sherlock Holmes, so he put that in as a gift for me. Man. But I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I was so excited because it wasn't just, a no shit Sherlock joke. It was an actual joke about a more obscure Sherlock Holmes story that not everyone knows, and I mean, it showed such intelligence, and I was so delighted by it. I mean, I just could not have been more happy. So that was actually, as I recall, the only time that he directly referenced Sherlock Holmes, but it was really fun.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine.
But I guess more in general about your career. For me, you've been in these roles that I've seen all my life. What does it mean to you, or how do you feel about having roles that are I guess iconic or favorite roles for people in different generations? Because you've gone from Risky Business and Booger and Better Off Dead, to Dan Versus and Moonlighting and even The New Girl and of course Metatron and Supernatural. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's very gratifying because now I'm going. I go to conventions and I meet people. I mean, there are the supernatural conventions, which are a separate issue. But if I go to regular conventions, like the one I'm going to one in November at Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Comic-Con, I get to meet people across the board. I get to meet supernatural people. I get to meet nerd people. I get to meet Better Off Dead people and Dan Versus people and American Dad people and all these different things that people have latched onto over the last few decades. And one of the things that's significant for me is understanding when I understand what it means to people, what the different things mean to people, and how parents have introduced their kids to, Better Off Dead or Revenge of the Nerds, or families watched King of the Nerds together, with the parents remembering Bobby and me from the movies and the kids watching something that's totally new. All of that is gratifying in a significant way because, you can forget when you've been doing something a long time the effect that it has on people. And the fact that now that we've got Twitter and we've got Facebook and we've got conventions, actors and writers and artists all have access to their following in a way that wouldn't have been imaginable when I was growing up. Yeah. Yeah. And when I was alive, when I was young, what I was about to say is when I was young, a lot of my heroes were still alive. Stan Laurel was still alive and, holding court in his apartment in Santa Monica. And there were a lot of people who, Boris Karloff, a lot of people that I had grown up really admiring were still alive. Well, if circumstances had been different and they had this kind of access when I was young, I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like to have been able to go and meet people like that, and to pose for pictures with them, and to get responses on the internet, and to watch Boris Karloff live tweeting while Frankenstein is playing on the Late Show. I mean, all of that stuff which could have happened if in another world. Now I see it happening with me, and I see the influence that the movies had on people, and the effect that characters that I played had on people, and it makes you realize the power of the media and the medium, and that you have had an impact on people and given pleasure to people. It was a long time before I really realized that I'd had what was already a career. Mm-hmm. Like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was working all the time, but I never thought of it as a career. I thought about it as just getting by. And then there was a point where I was able to look back and say, no, that's not just getting by. That's an actual career that you are having and still having. So, that's it's one of the things that all of this makes possible.
I've seen that impact that your roles have had extend not just to fans, but people in the industry also. Yeah. And specifically, the note Patton Oswalt wrote you about your character in Better Off Dead, and it's just
that was beautiful.
It was.
It's unexpected. I this is a guy who really knows. I mean, he's very gifted and really funny and terrific. And to have that just pop up was remarkable. But it does have that effect. And I've had a lot of jobs over the years with people who, are now directing or writing, stuff. And when they were young, they loved Revenge of the Nerds or Risky Business or, all of them. I mean, even then, I got Risky Business. Then I got Revenge of the Nerds because the director of Revenge of the Nerds loved Risky Business. And then I got Better Off Dead because the writer-director of Better Off Dead loved Risky Business and Revenge of the Nerds. And then I got Moonlighting because Glenn Caron loved Risky Business and called the producers of Risky Business to ask them whether I would be difficult, because he didn't want another difficult actor on his show. And fortunately, I was not difficult, and John Avnet was able to tell him, no, he's professional and easy to get along with. So that I got that job. So even those jobs in the 80s all came as a result of the previous job. And now, even now, it still happens where I get cast in something because somebody. Well, Seth MacFarlane is a good example. Doing American Dad all these years, playing a character named Snot. Seth loved Revenge of the Nerds, so it has all sorts of echoes.
Move on to King of the Nerds and talking about that, which, much to many of our chagrin, has been brought to a halt by TBS. I won't voice my opinion on on that, but that I specifically want to talk about because, in addition to some of your roles, has had some of the biggest impact on me, and I remember hearing in one of your interviews that it was not only a labor of your love, you and Bobby's love, but that you had been trying to get it going for several years before
Yeah.
it actually premiered.
Yeah.
But I personally, before we talk more about it, want to thank you for bringing King of the Nerds to television, because that was watching that show was the moment where I began to really live in to myself as a nerd. I've always been a nerd and all that, but had always hit the wall of it not being accepted or it being silly. So, kind of pushing it aside and trying to be a grown man and or even as a child, but it allowed me to accept that side of myself, and
Yeah.
that I want to thank you for. But I think it was interesting when they first started advertising it. Me personally, I thought it was just jumping on the hey, nerds are popular now, let's do this, but it became so much more than that. And
Well, I think if people gave it the time, they saw that. Some were prepared to dismiss it out of hand, um, which was unfortunate, including people like Will Wheaton, who was not generous in his response to it. But we were. It was something that I had said to the producers when we started work on it, when we finally got it going. And the thing that I was just adamant about and repeated over and over and over and over was that whenever they had a question about the direction or the tone of this series, they were to go back to Revenge of the Nerds and watch the pep rally at the end. Just watch the pep rally. That's what is at the root of everything. That's at the heart of this, is when Robert Carradine and Anthony Edwards stand up and come out as nerds. That scene is the heart of the movie, and it's the heart of what Bobby and I wanted for this show. We didn't want to make fun of people. We didn't want to, jump on any bandwagons. As the stars of that series of movies, Robert and I had sort of become unwittingly kind of nerd founding fathers in that new nerd concept of the new nerd, if you will. That was sort of a job that we took on, and we took on particularly seriously, me especially. Bobby never was really a nerd, as he said often. He never was. So it didn't have the same level. He didn't have the same level of commitment to nerd culture as I did, because I had been a nerd from birth. So it spoke to me on a level more than he. But that was it was our joint decision that this should be something that we wanted families to be able to watch, and nerds, young nerds especially, to be able to look at and say, I could be them, or look at people as they would appear, men and women, on our show, and see themselves in that person. That was really that was the root of what we always set out to do.
I loved about the show is that at times it seemed to be almost an indictment of other reality television, because unlike other
Yeah, indictment might be too harsh a word, but you're right about it being a parody of them. We were taking the Mickey out of them, I think, a bit, as our English friends would say. We were making fun of them, which we could do because the guys at 5x5, which was our production partner company, they, all of those people, and Electus too, they they had a history of doing actual reality competition reality shows, but this never was the it was never the intent for Revenge of the Nerds to really be a competition reality show. It was a comedy that happened to be a competition reality show, but it was always with that focus being always on the nerd and always on nerd culture, and the guests that we would bring in, the hosts, I mean, the judges we would bring in always had, serious nerd culture chops. And it was always, I mean, just this sort of portentous, you know, opening, talks about what was at stake. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was, and then it winds up that, whoever goes through these, 8 weeks winds up, getting $100,000 and the right to be called King of the Nerds. It was all silly. It wasn't $1 million.
Yeah.
It was $100,000 and a right to say you're King of the Nerds. And the truth is, most of those people would tell you that the right to be called King of the Nerds was probably more important to them than the $100,000.
But what also I found was that the show proved that you could have good reality TV with genuine people. You didn't have to have, while there was competition and certain people played the game a little bit, you didn't have to put on this facade or be this crazy character to have good reality TV. And that's what pulled me towards the show after I started watching a few episodes, because I've interacted with, several of the nerds outside of the show, and they are no different on camera than they are off camera. And I think that's what, other than the parody, it makes it that much better of a show. And I think that's why a lot of people loved it also, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, I loved it. I loved every season of it. Still to this day, to this day, it's like it was years ago. We only really found out that we'd been canceled. What, a couple of months ago?
Yeah,
a few
it
months.
hasn't been that long.
So it's not been that long, but it was one of the most important things that ever happened to me. It wasn't just like one of the most important jobs I've ever had. It was one of the most important things that ever happened in my life, in business or out of business. It was enormously important and significant to me. People might feel, it was just a silly show, but for me, it was a big deal and unforgettable. I guess now that I think about it, to have it canceled after 3 was still pretty good. Our ratings were as good or better than they'd been in the previous 2 seasons. If it hadn't been for sort of a personal antipathy to the show, we would probably still be on. But there was a lot of branding going on, rebranding going on at TBS. A lot of things change, and this happens all the time. I mean, it's not like this was an incredibly unfair tragedy that happened only to King of the Nerds. It happens every time there's a takeover of a new of a television network by someone else. That person looks at the material and goes, "I don't like that," so it goes, and then something else comes in, like America's Great Next Weatherman or whatever it is, that will be promoted almost exactly like King of the Nerds, but a different thing. So that's the way it goes.
Well, what's also amazing to me is anyone that follows you or any of the nerds on Twitter or social media know that after the season is done, off camera, you guys are one big family. It's
Mostly, we're mostly one big family. there are certainly some nerds who would not include themselves in that family. But that's like any family, I suppose. Yeah, well, this was my weakness. I have a weakness for these people, which is why I would never make a good reality producer. I was perfect for King of the Nerds. I was perfect. I would never be good in any other environment because what happened with King of the Nerds was I fell in love with all of those nerds. I loved them. I mean, I was grateful to them on one level because they gave us so much wonderful television. But aside from the executive producer part, there was also the Curtis Armstrong part who saw those people as like souls, you know? And that's hugely important. It's amazingly important to me and that was what changed everything. That became it's just weird that you do that and it changes your life. I was talking about it to Elaine the other day, and she was saying, and I was saying to her, here we are. We've been here so many years. We've gone through all of these jobs. We've met all these people, and we wind up. I had 3 of the nerds from season 3 in my house last weekend. They were here for the baby shower, Amanda's baby shower. So Lily and Heather and Todd were all staying here in the house. It was like we were. I work with Genevieve all the time, in touch with Kayla and all of it. I mean, it's just there were relationships made which, are ongoing and warm and deep. And that's pretty special. And I wasn't expecting to make so many new friends at this point in my life, especially young friends.
Well, I don't want to keep you much longer, so what I'm going to do is every episode I have what I call the lightning round, where I just ask questions. Want to have you give the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll just throw them out there. Of all the cosplays or the costumes that you wore on King of the Nerds, what was your favorite?
Probably the alien, the female alien that I wore in season 3. Bobby was sort of dressed as a brown coat, and I was dressed as this alien. It was such an amazing costume that Robin put together. I loved that one.
Of all the Nerd Wars or Nerd Offs, what was your favorite?
That's really impossible. I can't. I'll say the Harry Potter, the Quidditch one, but it could be any. I mean, it's impossible to say that.
The show had such a great team coming up with those competitions. But your 3 desert island books, not including Sherlock Holmes.
Well, not including Sherlock Holmes,
because that's a given, at least.
But that's the point of the desert island books.
Okay, including Sherlock Holmes.
You have to, if you're doing desert island books, I think it has to be included.
Okay, include Sherlock Holmes.
All right, so yes, the complete Sherlock Holmes would definitely be on there. Washington Irving's The Sketchbook would be on there, and Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers would be on there. Mm-hmm. So those 3.
On the topic of books, for fellow bibliophiles that are trying to expand their horizon, any recommendations of books to read?
Bibliophiles?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, if they can find it, there's the best book ever written for bibliophiles would be Holbrook Jackson's book, The Anatomy of Bibliomania. which is it's actually 2 volumes, which treats bibliomania, the love of books, as essentially a disease. It's done in a very tongue-in-cheek way, done in the style of Robert Burton's book called Anatomy of Melancholy. And it's that would be one of the books to read, probably. Gosh, there's so many.
Okay. How about for non-bibliophiles, just avid readers? What is one or two books that they should go out and read now?
Boy, it's a wide selection. I would say if you've not read Charles Dickens, you must read Charles Dickens. So I would say Nicholas Nickleby, which isn't a common one necessarily, but one that I really truly love. I mean, my head's just exploding with possibilities here. So it's hard to nail down one or two. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's fine. I was gonna say Nicholas Nickleby's. That's a good place to leave it. I've heard in one of your interviews that you are a huge fan of classic horror films.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do your 3 Desert Island classic horror films.
Oh, okay. It would be Dracula, the 1931. It would be Son of Frankenstein, and Dracula, Son of Frankenstein, and I don't know, The Mummy, the original Mummy.
I'm one that believes the classic horror films are much better than current horror. I know growing up, it was Nosferatu and the original Phantom of the Opera that terrified me more because it left more to the imagination.
Nosferatu is truly deeply scary still, I find.
Now, with the trend of remaking movies in 80s movies, of the movies you've been in, what would you like to see remade if they did?
I don't want any of them remade. I'm not a big fan of remakes. Even though, I mean, you know, some of movies that I like, you know, when you're going back, at least sequels, were great favorites of mine. But no, I don't like them. It's become too easy to do that.
That's a good point. Well, Curtis, I will leave it here. I think we'll call that a show, if you will. But thank you again for doing this, Curtis. I appreciate it. And to those watching, if you liked it, go ahead and press the like button and subscribe if you haven't. You have a great day, Curtis.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jarrod. Take care.
No problem.
Yeah, Confluence is doing great. It's actually here's the book. I don't know if that really showed up the first time, but this is actually my first full-length collection, meaning it's slightly thick. It's still pretty thin. I have had a couple chapbooks come out before this, and so this is the first book that kind of encapsulates everything that I have been doing in the past 5 years or so. And we've done pretty well. We've sold a few hundred